Well, it's been very positive. You know, we've seen inquiry more than double. In fact, if you go back to last year's average, we're up about 3 times where we were. So that's been a big plus and has brought a lot of first home buyer and owner-occupier interest. Of course, it's bringing demand forward, but at a critical time when everyone's been worried about the stimulus runoff and what does that mean. So to see housing picking up with an economic multiplier of 3 times, the second biggest economic multiplier of any industry, employing more than 150,000 people in Australia, it's a big plus.
We've just seen this week the data come out on the importance of the housing construction market to the economy. I hadn't really appreciated how important.
Well, it's a big sector. I mean, housing is $6 trillion, and so representing house construction itself directly is 5% of GDP. If you look at all construction, it's getting close to 10%.
It's the second biggest driver of jobs in the economy.
That's right. Yeah, for every dollar, so you spend $1 million, you get 9 full-time jobs. Every home built is 3 full-time jobs. And you have, of course, multipliers through everything from people selling carpet, furnishings, your tradies, everything. People doing home financing. If you think about it, it touches just about every part of the economy.
So given how important the sector is to the economy, is HomeBuilder enough? Is that it? Do you want more?
Well, I think HomeBuilder's great. I mean, I can't knock that. The $25,000 together with the state grants means in WA you get $69,000 as a first home buyer, around $40,000 plus in the other states. So that's very good. It's a 6-month program, and then you've got 3 months to start work, so it gets you through to March next year. I would encourage the government to look at potentially extending that.
Anything else that you'd look to stimulate the sector?
Well, the planning is very important. Historically, a lot of cost has been added through delays, and so the initiatives we're seeing, particularly here in New South Wales, and we've seen a real focus here, but also in the other states, that's a big plus. So I think the things that are being focused on are right. The proposal around potentially abolishing stamp duty is a big one. That would really change people's ability to move homes, and that affects the mobility of labour.
Well, we've got the State Treasurer Dominic Perrottet here in New South Wales talking the talk, but do you think he really would put on a land tax? Because it's going to cost the state, at least in the near term, isn't it, from stamp to land?
Well, it does give them a more reliable income. It's rather than going up and down with the housing market. I think that the New South Wales and Victorian Treasurers, and by definition the Premiers, are absolutely committed to this.
So you see it happening over the next 5 years or so?
Subject to the federal government, it's going to be a multi-layered approach, but the idea of saying you can either pay stamp duty or you can pay land tax also helps, because it creates a transitionary effect and enables people to choose. And that flexibility, I think, will help as well.
Let's move to the retail sector, which has been quite controversial through the pandemic. We've had rearguard action from tenants like Solomon Lew, or even companies who seem to be doing quite well like Priceline. How have you, as a landlord, responded, and what action would you like taken now?
Well, the first thing was making sure our centres were safe, and we were able to work with Treasury and the government and the COVID Commission and the industry to make sure that was the case, and we are not aware of any community transfer in any of our centres or centres generally, and so they were able to trade all the way through providing essential services, so that's critical. We work directly on the code, the commercial code, and I think that provides a fair way to help businesses get to the other side, and that's in everybody's interests. We clearly want as few bankruptcies as possible. And so we've been talking to our tenants, working through the code. We deferred rent during the real peak of the impacts in April and May for the small and medium enterprises to give everyone breathing space to work through this. The dialogue has been generally constructive, and we're progressively either applying the code or agreeing positions with our tenants. So we're pretty optimistic. We're now more than 92% open by income, and foot traffic's almost back to where it was pre-crisis. So the town centres are actually thriving.
But you've still got rental holidays going, don't you?
Yeah, well, the code's got a combination of either abatement and deferral, proportional to the reduction in sales for small and medium enterprise, and also asked to follow the spirit for other tenants. And so, yes, there's some combination typically of a waiver and an abatement for those tenants that have been severely impacted by the COVID crisis, particularly in the small and medium enterprise.
Mark, I'm just looking at the retail turnover data, largest seasonally adjusted rise ever published in 38 years for April, up 17.7%. And in clothing, footwear, personal accessory retailing, it's up over 100%. Now, how is that going to help get things back to normal?
Well, the recovery that we're seeing and people's desire to re-engage in a town centre setting and to be social, we are social, I think is really encouraging, because there was some thought that that might not be the case. Of course, online's been growing as well. But, retail and services is one of the largest employers in the country. And seeing the restrictions continuing to lift around food courts and cinemas and across the whole range, gyms, etc., means that really, as we move through July, pretty much the whole economy will be open. And so that means that we can transition from being frozen to open as an economy, and that's absolutely mission critical as it relates to the relative success of Australia.
So how soon before the bulk of SMEs will be paying full rent again, do you think?
Oh, I would say a lot of them will be paying full rent in June and July.
And in the office market, where I think you've got about 10% of your portfolio, we've seen this extraordinary move to working from home. Now, that's not likely to go away. How is that going to impact?
Well, we think flexibility will be more the norm going forward. And if you look at our employees, the surveys there show they would like to, long term, work between 1 and 2 days a week at home. I think the function will change. You'll see a lot more. It'll be around, obviously, client meetings, training, interaction, teamwork, and then other sort of more individual work, and those types of things will be able to be done, in a flexible location. But I don't think the net demand probably reduces significantly.
Really, even once social distancing is dropped, because at the moment, obviously, people need the space in offices, but once that's dropped, aren't we going to get companies with 30% of their workforce wanting to work from home and therefore requiring a lot less space?
Well, I think it'll be a transition through time, and using that space differently still means it requires, probably around about the same amount of space as today. It may, I think if you really sum up, it's probably a negative for demand in the shorter term, and in the longer term, it's likely to be neutral. But it's showing that, as retail was disrupted by digital, so too, to some degree, is the office market.
Mark, your share price seems to have marched back steadily from that March 23 low. What do you put that down to? Well,
I think certainly coming through and seeing the crisis stabilise for Australia, and the stimulus from the government, while they didn't end up having to spend all the JobKeepers so far, over 16% of GDP, we had one of the largest stimuluses in the world. So those two factors would be two key drivers, I think, and of course we continue to have a strong balance sheet.
And the rental market, that seems very soft. Is that impacting you at all?
No, we do new home development typically, so we don't have rental exposure per se, but I think the higher vacancy that we observe is focused more around the CBDs in the short-term rental market, and some of the the investment, more intensive investment part of the market. 90% at the moment of our buyers are owner-occupiers. Over half are first-home buyers. So we're very much in the middle of Australia, affordable target, very high-quality education, high amenity, nice town centres, walking, running trails, good access to public transport and jobs. That's our story, and that's where the growth is. I think some of the changes from this are people are very orientated now towards family, to core values of health and well-being, having a bit of space. Those things are important, and that is the sweet spot of our business.
Mark Steinert, great to talk. Thank you.